If everybody could please find their seats, we're about to begin. If everybody could please find their seats, we're about to begin.
Governor, how are you? How are you? Governor, good to see you again. Did you? No, I know it's been your turn. Good evening, everybody.
Nice to see you again. Great to see you. All right.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you. Good to be back in New Hampshire. Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate all of you taking the time to be here. And we're inside 8 weeks now. So it is time for us to get serious. We are out of the dating stage. All right? We're out of the dating stage. It's time to get married. And to show you that can actually work and we can have a long-term relationship, here's my wife of 37 years. I guarantee you I'll be a lot easier on all of you than I've been on her. I can guarantee you. When we came up last time, Mary Pat was not with me. She was getting ready for us to host 25 people at our house on Thanksgiving. I was up here last Tuesday night, and I tell her all the time that when I come into a room like this and she's not with me, I see like visible faces of disappointment. And she thinks I'm just telling her that, but it's true. And I'm glad she's here with me tonight, and you're going to be seeing us both a lot over the next 8 weeks. So if it's game time, if it's the fourth quarter in this fight for the Republican primary here in New Hampshire, then we can't mince any words. Now, I've never been known for that anyway, but I'm going to tell you flat out that as the campaign gets more pressurized, as the attention gets greater, you start to see who people really are. And that's what makes this primary so great, is that you get to be at this distance from any of us that you want. And you don't need some kind of objective test. You all will use what you got, what you've learned over all your years, to make an evaluation of whether someone's genuine or they're not. And so I want to talk first tonight about an issue that's really emotional, really difficult and important in our country, but where you have a right to know where everybody really stands. And that issue is abortion. And look, it is a difficult, personal issue for anybody who has to confront some of those moments. I will tell you, from me personally, I look at this issue in the context of my own family. My mom and dad and brother and I had the extraordinary opportunity when I was 11 and he was 9 to adopt our sister. And we adopted her. She was 2 years old, and she was the product of a single teenage mother who had been in foster care for 2 years. She was born in 1971 when abortion was illegal in the state of New Jersey. If it had been 2 years later, I'm convinced that this sister of mine, who I've loved her whole life and who now has 5 beautiful children, would have never been here. So when I talk about this issue, it's personal to me because I've experienced the joy of what adoption can bring. And, everyone, though, has to make their own judgments on this. And for 50 years, the Supreme Court took that away from each state, said all decisions are going to be made here in Washington, D.C. by a group of, at that time, 9 men on the Supreme Court. And now the Supreme Court has changed course and said every state can make their own decision. The people of those states can decide what they want the law to be in their state. It's a moment of real freedom for people, and it empowers people. And I want you all to make those decisions. And if you watch what's going on in Washington, that House of Representatives who took 3 weeks to pick a speaker, the United States Senate, who has 400 military promotions being held up because of politics, affecting our military, and those men and women who deserve those promotions, earn them, and are not getting them because of politics. Do you want to put the issue of human life in their hands? I don't. And this is a big difference between me and Governor Haley. I didn't think it was a difference between the two of us because I've listened to her here and on the debate stage. And she has said she doesn't want this issue to divide our country. She wants everybody to come together. She doesn't want to have division created by Washington, D.C. But then last week, I saw her in Iowa. And in Iowa, she was sitting at a conservative forum across from a guy who helps to organize the evangelical community in Iowa. And she was asked this: Governor DeSantis here is for a 6-week ban on abortion, and Vivek, who was sitting there as well, is for a 6-week ban. Are you? Would you sign a 6-week ban? And she said she would. Now, listen, everybody. I don't care what her position is, even if I disagree with it. But there can't be one position in Iowa and one position in New Hampshire. You cannot be a truth teller and say one version of the truth in Iowa when you're in front of a very conservative group, and then when you're here in New Hampshire with a libertarian audience, a live free or die audience, give a different answer that you think they'll like. Because the problem with that is that we don't know what she really believes. And I think we've gone through enough presidents with Barack Obama and Donald Trump and now Joe Biden, who campaigned telling us one thing and then did something different when they got there. Barack Obama, you remember, told us, if you like your doctor, you can keep him. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it. Didn't turn out to be true. Donald Trump, I would use the rest of the town hall to go through all of the lies that he's told us, but let's just pick one, because this was his most famous one from the 2016 campaign. I'm going to build a big, beautiful wall along the entire border of the United States and Mexico, and Mexico's going to pay for it. Well, after 4 years, we got 52 miles of new wall, and Mexico hasn't paid their first peso. And interestingly now, I heard Donald Trump up here a few weeks ago, and he said, who would have ever believed that another country would pay for a wall in our country? And I'm like, well, hell, man, I don't know. You were saying it about 5,000 times during the campaign, so people actually believed you. And then we got Joe Biden saying he was going to govern to bring the country together. He was going to be a moderate. He was going to work both parties to the middle. And he got into office and he ran right to the left and spent more money than we've seen in a long, long time. You can agree or disagree with those policies, but what I would respectfully say to you is you can't agree with being lied to. And so my concern about Nikki Haley is, where is she on this issue? Is she the person who would sign a 6-week abortion ban in Iowa, but not make the decision here in New Hampshire? Because let me tell you, she signs that 6-week ban as president, that's going to be the law right here in New Hampshire, whether you like it or not. And so it's time, since it's game time, to find out who the real players are. When the lights get bright and everybody starts paying attention, some politicians decide they're going to be everything to everybody. They look in your eyes, they try to figure out what you want to hear, and they give you that answer, and they hope to God that you don't remember when they do the opposite. Here's the good news, though. She did it now. Not after you voted for her. She did it now. And it's not only that. The front runner in this race is Donald Trump. I just said his name out loud. And lightning did not strike me. I did not fall dead of a heart attack. I have not been poisoned by a member of his staff. But you would think, when you look at the rest of the folks in this race, that they fear that's what would happen if they said his name. I saw a new TV ad today out from Governor Haley, and this is what she says. We have to leave behind the chaos and drama of the past. What? What's that mean exactly, Governor? Why not say it? He's not Voldemort from the Harry Potter books. He's not he who shall not be named. No, this is trying to have it both ways. She doesn't want to offend people who have supported Donald Trump. So she says things like in South Carolina 3 days ago, he was the right president at the right time, but for some reason, drama and chaos follow him wherever he goes, as if he is an innocent victim. You want to know why chaos and drama follows him wherever he goes? Because he can't shut his mouth for 3 seconds. He can't tell the truth. He can't stick by any position for longer than 15 or 20 minutes. He sends out social media posts at 2 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, being thankful for all the people he hates. How could chaos and drama follow him? It just seems to follow him wherever he goes. Look, it was not popular when I entered this race to say Donald Trump is unfit to be president of the United States because of his conduct, because of what he's done to this country. He's unfit. And I don't know if any of you saw when I went down to the Republican Party of Florida convention, got a wonderful reception there. And what I said to them when they got done booing me before I had uttered a word, all they heard was my name. That was enough. And I got up on the stage and I let them boo. And then I leaned on the podium and I said, your fear of the truth is reprehensible. This is the truth. And we better start telling each other the truth again. Because if we don't, our country will go further and further into division and anger. And we can't have that. But Governor Haley won't say it. For some reason, chaos and drama follows him wherever. She's trying to be clever. She's trying to send you a signal. She's like winking at you and saying, yeah, I'm talking about Trump. But I don't want to say it out loud because the people over here don't like it. So, but you and I know what we're talking about. So when she's in New Hampshire with an audience that demands the truth, she winks at you, tells you, like, we know what we're talking about. We won't talk about it now. Elect me first. I'll take care of it. Except she's also said that she'd be inclined to pardon him. Inclined to pardon him. The law in this country applies to everyone. Everyone. And if he has committed crimes, which I believe he has, then he deserves to be convicted and sent to jail for it, because that's what would happen to you. But she won't say it. So look, there are all kinds of people up here now who know this is down to a 3-person race in New Hampshire. This is Donald Trump, me, and Nikki Haley. And I'll just tell you, right out of the jump, if you want Trump, then vote for him or Nikki. Because she's not going to say a bad word about him. If she becomes president, she's going to pardon him, no matter what happens. If you want a real change in this country, you got the chance to do it right here. Like nobody else in the country has a chance to do it. New Hampshire has a chance to do it. And now it's time. And that's why I said it's time to stop dating. It's time to make some decisions. And I want you to side with truth. Because look, even the people who boo me for saying it, they know I'm telling the truth. They just don't like it. They feel aggrieved for some reason. What they need to understand is that there's 2 differences between me and Donald Trump, at least. One is I tell the truth and he doesn't. And the second one is, if you elect me, I'll actually do what I say. You watched him. Don't see that wall. He said he's going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Oh, still there. Said he was going to balance the budget in 4 years. He added $7.8 trillion in debt in 4 years, the most debt any president has added onto this country's balance sheet in 4 years in our history. He does whatever he thinks are in his interest at the moment. His interest, not your interest, his. And look, the end of all this, what matters the most is that our country deserves better. We should not have to settle for a choice between a 78-year-old guy who has been indicted 4 different times on 91 counts of crimes against this country, or with an 82-year-old guy who, with all due respect to President Biden, who I've known for 40 years and who I like as a person, but he's not up to it anymore, everybody. And you don't need some test to figure that out. You watch him on TV and you can see it. And that's today. He wants to be president 5 years from now. We deserve a better choice in this country than that. And you're the ones who can make it happen. And so we can talk about every other issue you want to talk about tonight. I am here to take questions for the next couple of hours, and we'll take as many questions as you can give me about any issues you want to talk about. But in the end, let's not play make-believe. This race in the Republican Party is about Donald Trump. He's been the nominee the last 2 times. We get up on those stages because he doesn't show up at the debates, and we pretend that the choice is between us. You listen to Nikki and Ron and Vivek, and they all talk about each other. It's the great fight for second place. They're battling like animals to be in second place. I'm from New Jersey, man. Second place, you know what we call second place in New Jersey? The first loser. The first loser. I am running and have been running from the beginning to win. And if you want to win, you got to beat the guy who's in front of you. And so let's not pretend. That is the fight. That is the choice. It's not between me and Nikki and Ron and Vivek. No. It's between Trump and who do you believe when this race narrows to the end and there's Trump against one other person? Who's the person you want standing on that stage to take him on? Who's the person you think is tough enough and strong enough and smart enough and experienced enough to look him in the eye and call him on every bit of his bull? To hold him to account like a prosecutor would hold him account in a courtroom. And that's what I did, and that's what I'll do. And you don't have to wonder about that because I've been doing it every day I've been up here since June 6th when I came up here and declared for president. You've never heard a different word out of me. When they all raised their hands on the stage in the first debate, remember that moment? Would you support him even if he's a convicted felon? They all raised their hands. Not me. And you remember that night in Milwaukee, I got booed like crazy by 8,000 people for not raising my hand. And when they got done booing, I looked right into the camera and said, he is unfit to be president and we deserve better. You're not going to have to wonder if I'm going to pardon him, because I'm not. So it is time to get to the important part of a New Hampshire town hall. And I want you to notice now, I want you to go to Nikki Haley's town halls. I want you to go to Ron DeSantis' town halls. I do. I want you to go and go to the Trump show if you want, because he didn't take any questions. He just stands up there and talks at you for 2 hours. Tells you how aggrieved he is, how horribly he's treated, terribly, terribly treated. Everyone's so mean to me, and I'm going to get all of them back when I become president again, right? I mean, go to the Trump show if you want, but I want you to go to those other town halls because I want you to see the difference between this and theirs. I have people here with microphones, but you know who they go to? They go to the person I call on, who raises their hand. You know what happens at the Nikki Haley town halls? Her people pick who is going to give the question. I wonder how they know. I wonder how they know. Because every question turns out to be really friendly. You know, the questions that start, Governor Haley, I love you. And you would be an incredible president. Can you please explain to me why you're so incredible? How lucky to have just been able to pick that question out of a crowd of 200 people. I want you to go and watch. It's time now. There's no phoniness here. You may not like everything I say. In fact, I'm pretty sure you won't. But you will never have to wonder whether I believe it. And you won't go to Nashua next week or Merrimack or Manchester to another town hall and hear something different. You'll hear the same answers to these questions because it's what I believe. And you know what happens when you're president? It's okay, you can mute it. You know what happens when you're president? They don't get to pick out the questions for you. You know, nobody told Joe Biden on October 6th that on October 7th, Hamas was going to attack Israel. It happens. And you got to be ready. And you got to know what you believe and who you are and what this country stands for and how you can make this country stronger and better and freer and what role we play around the world. And they won't be on index cards. And they won't have a staff member going out and say, oh, no, your crisis today is not, we're not prepared for that one. She's prepared to answer her crisis, not your crisis. It's not the way it works when you're president. It's game time, everybody. It's game time. So the real game starts when you start raising your hands. So let's start. I don't want to start with the red vest tonight. I often do that. I don't want to do that. I want to start with the young guy all the way in the back.
Hi, Governor. Very nice to meet you. My name is Evan. I'm 24. I'm from Massachusetts.
Okay, Evan, give the microphone back. If you can. Evan, for God's sake, I need people who can vote here, Evan.
I will. I wanted to. I'm planning to vote for you on Super Tuesday. But
Okay, all right. 2
hours
All right,
away.
I'll give you a break, Evan. Go ahead.
I'm really motivated about politics. I'm interested. I can't get my friends to vote because they don't care. They think that their vote doesn't matter. My question is to you about the national debt. It's around 33 trillion, I believe. My question is for you, is it a priority for you as president to lower the debt? If not, why? If so, how would you lower the debt as president?
It is a priority, and I'm glad that you're thinking about it. And I'm glad that you're involved enough to show up here. And you should drag some of your friends with you when you have the chance, because once they hear some of this stuff, they're going to know this is about their future more than it's about mine. That debt is not about my future. I'm 61 years old. Any luck, I'll be around for another 20 years or maybe more. But the debt's not going to be a huge crisis for me, but it will be for you if we don't do something. So it is a priority for me. Here's how I do it. I do it the exact same way I did it in New Jersey when I inherited an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. And what I did was I went to something that I would do as the president too in the federal government. I go to zero-based budgeting. And what that means is every department has to come in, and they don't start at where they were last year. They start at zero. And they have to justify to me and my team every program they have. What happened when we did that in New Jersey was in my first year, we eliminated 832 programs. And we did it not because I thought every one of those programs were not worthy. There were plenty that weren't, but there's some that I eliminated that were. But we had a huge deficit. And in the state, you don't have an opportunity to run a deficit, so you got to balance it. I think we have to take the same attitude and approach in the federal government. And I would take that same approach. Now, I was able to fix that problem in the first year and then keep it going thereafter. I won't fix this problem in the first year, and I won't fix it in the first 4 in terms of the deficit, not even the debt, but not adding any more to the deficit. That's going to take 8 years. And anybody who tells you any differently is lying to you. We have a $2 trillion deficit this year. I'm not going to be able to fix that in a couple of years. Just not. It's going to take continued effort for every year for 8 years. But I believe after 8 years, we can bring the budget into balance. And at the same time, that will help to lower interest rates because we'll stop printing so much money and borrowing so much. And that will make the economy grow because people will be able to borrow money at reasonable rates, invest in their businesses, create jobs, and do all the other things they do when interest rates are reasonable, not like they are right now. And when we do that, people pay more in taxes, and that helps us with reducing the debt and the deficit as well. But it's going to be an 8-year project because we have had presidents really since Barack Obama who have just blown this budget out. And both parties, Republicans controlled everything in 2017 and 2018. And we had huge deficits because even Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell with Donald Trump, they all just kept spending and spending and spending. They want to say no to anybody. Look, when I did that 832 program reduction in New Jersey, my popularity went from 55% to 38%. And I had people saying to me like, you must not be concerned about getting reelected. And I wasn't. It's not that I didn't want to be reelected. It was that I knew this is what I had to do. I wasn't going to raise taxes on the people in New Jersey who are already some of the highest taxed people in the country. So I had to do this. I had to make a decision and put up with the consequences. But let me tell you, by 3 years later, I got reelected with 61% of the vote. Because people looked and said, wow, he actually did what he said. He said he wasn't going to raise taxes, and he didn't. And I don't like every decision he made to not raise my taxes, but you know what? I like that he didn't raise my taxes. I like that he kept his word. And they voted for me even if they disagreed with some of those 832 decisions. I'm going to act the same way as president, the very same way. And it's because if you're president of the United States, you're president of everybody, including you. And at 24 years old, you should have hope that this country can be great for you the same way it was great for me when I was 24. And if we don't deal with this problem, it won't be. And I can't live with that. So that's what we'll do. Yes, ma'am. Sure, but they'll give you a microphone so people can hear you. No problem.
Thank you. It's been said that you want to end the war on drugs, but then it's also been said that you're about halfway on that. You're on two sides of the coin for that. As the person who is the chairman of the International Overdose Awareness Day event for the state of New Hampshire and promoting it to other communities for personal reasons, as well as trying to remove the stigma for other people in the community who've lost someone or are walking through that with someone, it's all over the board now. It's every economic level, creed, color, and it's everything from people who are struggling with drug addiction to the teenager who's having an anxiety attack and his friend gives him a supposed Prozac that's loaded, laced with fentanyl. And I would just like to know how you're going to work with those of us on the community in the committee who are trying to address that and what you're going to do about it.
Yep. Well, I would respectfully say to you that from the time I've been U.S. attorney, I've never been on both sides of this. My position is really clear. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem. We cannot enforce our way out of this problem. We can't, because it's a disease. It is not a moral failing. It is a disease. And, you know, when you look at cancer or diabetes or heart disease, there is human behavior that contributes to all of those diseases. Yet, we don't say to those people, well, you don't deserve treatment because, hell, you ate all that red meat, now you had a heart attack. You ate all that sugar, now you have diabetes. You smoke cigarettes. We're not going to treat your cancer. Look, I do this test. I try to do it every time this topic comes up. I'd love anybody in this room who has not made a decision in their life they wish they could take back to raise their hand. Good. Still undefeated. Although I will tell you that last week, I had a 7-year-old kid who raised his hand. And I said, okay, man, you're exempt. But wait, you won't be able to raise your hand in a few years, I'm confident. The theory behind the stigma is that, well, they made the decision to try drugs, and once they made the decision to try it, well, they get what they deserve. Well, one, we know that that's not always the case, like the example you gave of the person who think they're taking one thing and it's laced with something else, right? But also, you have people who make a bad decision, and they try, and they don't know how it's going to affect them. Some people can take it once and walk away from it and never rears its head in their life again. Some people take it once and they are hooked and they need help. So what would I do? The first thing is I'd start talking like that. You know, the president of the United States can have an enormous impact on how people view things if he or she stands up there and says it over and over and over again. And if I keep saying, and the best example I can give you of this is not even a president, it was a first lady. When Betty Ford was public about her breast cancer and her alcoholism, she changed people's view all across this country. Women started talking about the issue of breast cancer after Betty Ford gave them permission to do it, that there was nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be scared of, nothing to be embarrassed by. So we've seen it happen before in this country, and that's what I'll do. Because if you believe in life, it's not just the 9 months in the womb. It gets really complicated when they come out, right? Really complicated. And you have to be for the beauty and the treasure of that life of the 16-year-old girl who was laying drug addicted on the floor of the county lockup, or of the 50-year-old lawyer who gets hooked on Percocet because he's got a bad back and he's throwing his life away because of it, or the 65-year-old woman who starts taking painkillers because of physical ailments and gets hooked. They all are a precious gift from God, and we have to treat them that way. Second, you know now that when we do enforcement actions against drug dealers and we seize their assets and their cash, all of that money goes towards more enforcement. I was the beneficiary of that when I was U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. We got hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to do more enforcement from drug dealer proceeds. I would change that. I don't want it to go to enforcement. I want it to go to treatment. We don't have a shortage of enforcement in this country. We have a shortage of treatment in this country. And we need more treatment centers, more treatment professionals to be able to help folks because there are ways that we can treat people now that didn't exist even 15 or 20 years ago. There's medication-assisted treatment, along with all the other treatments that we've had before, that can show real progress for people and help them. So I would expand the availability of treatment by using those assets to be able to do it. And third, we don't have enough professionals out there to treat all the people who need to be treated. And so when we talk about student loan forgiveness, I don't want to forgive student loans for everybody, but I do want to forgive student loans for people who are going to go into areas where we need people. And one of the places we need people are psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, and nurses who need to treat those folks and can be trained to do it. And we need to incentivize them to go into that field more. And so if we forgive student loans in return for them going into that field, I think that's a win-win for our country. We get more people who are there and available to provide treatment. What we've done is given them a break on money that they owed. I think that's a smart way to do it. Not give student loan forgiveness to everybody, but give student loan forgiveness to those people who want to go to work in areas where we have a real need in this country, where it's a life or death issue. So those are three things that I would do about it. But I would tell you that the single most important thing I want you to walk away from tonight, in my view on this is that this is a disease that can and needs to be treated. And we need to stop judging. I use the example of my mother all the time. My mother was an addict. She was addicted to nicotine. She started smoking when she was 16 years old in 1948, when not only did people not tell you it was bad for you, they told you it was good for you. And she got hooked. And I watched my mother over all the years. I was asthmatic. I am asthmatic. She would smoke in front of me because she couldn't help herself. And she knew it was hurting her oldest child. And she couldn't stop. She tried patches and gum and hypnosis, and she couldn't stop. And after 55 years of smoking, she was diagnosed with lung cancer that had spread throughout her entire body. And within 4 months of the diagnosis, she was dead. But in those 4 months, we never stopped telling people that she had cancer. We told her friends what was going on with her and others. We got recommendations for doctors and treatments. We had people who came and sat with her and made her final months as pleasant as they could make it for her. If my mother was a heroin addict, would I have told them? I don't think so. And the problem is that stigma not only stops us from talking about it, it stops the person in pain from asking for help. And until they ask for help, we can't help them. And we need to give them permission to ask for help. You want to be pro-life? That's great. Let's be pro-life the whole life, not just the 9 months in the womb. And the drug problem in this state and in this country is the greatest threat to life we have in America right now. It's the leading killer of 18 to 34-year-old men. Last year, 14 people of every 100,000 in this country committed suicide. It's the highest suicide rate since 1941 in this country. We got a problem and we need to deal with it. And so that's the way I would talk about it. That's what I would do about it. And that's the kind of president I would be about it. And let there be no doubt about that, because that's the way I've always felt and the way I will always feel about it, because I believe that every life is precious, no matter what condition you find it in. And that when we have the ability to help, that we should not only help, but encourage those who need the help to ask without judgment. So that's the way I feel about that one. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You.
I'd like to know what you would do about the AR-15.
Yeah, look, I will tell you this. If you look at, let's take a look at what happened in Maine recently, right? 3% of the gun crime in Maine in the last year was committed by anything other than a handgun. 97% of it was done with a handgun. If I thought that I could eliminate thousands of deaths a year by getting rid of any class of weapon, I'd consider it. I just don't believe that's what's going to happen. And when you have a country that has 330 million people and 350 million guns in circulation, if you ended the sale of those guns tomorrow, you would still have 350 million guns in circulation. And so I don't believe eliminating any one class of weapon does that. I think it goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about, or at least I touched on in this answer, which is when you look at what happened in Maine, there were red flags waving all over the place about that guy. His employer told folks it was a problem. His family went to law enforcement and said it was a problem. Law enforcement failed on that one, and people are dead because of it. I don't think it's a lack of laws in this country. I think it's a lack of mental health treatment and a lack of aggressive enforcement by law enforcement, who doesn't know exactly what to do with someone who has a mental health problem and is speaking violently. So I would make it easier for people to be involuntarily committed if they show signs of mental health problem and are speaking violently. And I did that in New Jersey when I was governor. It was somewhat controversial, but you need to get those people off the street and into some treatment before they commit a violent act. And in my dealings as a prosecutor with criminals, every time in New Jersey, we have what's characterized at least as the second toughest gun laws in the country. But it didn't reduce in any significant way the number of gun crimes I was prosecuting as a federal prosecutor, because they don't follow the gun laws. They're crooks, and they don't follow the gun laws. And so if I thought, let's ban all guns, despite the fact that we have a Second Amendment that says you can't do it, or if I said, let's just ban one class of guns, I simply don't think that doing that, I think that's going to be like giving candy. Feels good when you first eat it, but after a while, it's not going to get at the root problem. And I don't think getting rid of AR-15s is going to get at the root problem. We've gotten rid of a lot of other classes of weapons too over time that are still banned federally, fully automatic weapons and others. Yeah, right. And yet we still have this epidemic of gun deaths in our country. So I think the past tells us that that doesn't work. What will work is trying to get people before they pull that trigger, because most of these mass shootings that we see, almost all of them, are someone who has a real mental health problem. And we've got to deal with that problem. I'll end with this, though. It's inadequate. My answer is inadequate. Right? Like, I don't expect you to walk away and going like, that's it. We didn't know it. Now we know it. He's going to fix it. It's inadequate. But when I try to balance the interests of what's worked in the past, a Second Amendment, which says that people have a right to bear arms in this country, and the mental health issues, when I look at that stew, that's the best answer I come up with. But I recognize, even when I'm saying it, that I wish I had something else. But I don't.
You don't think that the same nutcase that kills people, if he couldn't get his hands on an AR-15, wouldn't the whole United States, the whole world, wouldn't we be better off if an AR-15 weapon were only in the hands of law enforcement and, God forbid, the military?
If we could get rid of all of the guns like that, let's just deal with your class of question, on AR-15s that were in circulation, then maybe you would have a point in my view. But there's so many out there now that the idea that somebody who is determined to get their hands on one won't, I don't believe it. And the reason I don't believe it is because I've looked at history, and those laws have not stopped people who are intent on doing that. But I absolutely believe I'm right about that. But I also know that for a family who's had someone who's been a victim of that crime, it's not a good enough answer for them. I know that. But I also know that getting rid of the Second Amendment is not something I'm willing to do. And just giving you a law that would make everybody feel better. I'll give you one example of this from New Jersey. They passed a law to get rid of a 50 caliber rifle. Now, 50 caliber rifle is like as big as half a conference table. Like it's not something somebody's gonna be carrying around and using in a mass shooting. It's a target shooting gun. I vetoed it. They said Christie opposes the elimination of gun violence. And so my response at the press conference was, no, I really don't. I just oppose stupid laws that make people feel safer, but don't make them safer. And I'm not going to put my name on that. And so I think this is a really hard issue, really, really hard. In fact, I think one of the hardest issues for this country to grapple with, to balance our civil liberties as they're laid out in the Constitution, our history and what we know is true about gun laws, and the death that we see in front of us. That's the best answer I've got for it. If you get an answer from somebody else that you think is better, leave your number with your folks. We'll get in touch with you, and I'm happy to adopt a better idea. But that's where I'm at on this one. But thank you for asking. All right. Yes, sir. You're standing up? Yep, sure. Nope, not you with the hat. You with the hoodie. But I'll get to you with the hat after that, all right?
My question is, how are you going to beat Donald Trump? Because that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
At the end of the line, beating Donald Trump. And I voted for Donald Trump both times. How are you going to win over someone like me by attacking him? Because I feel like if we want to leave Donald Trump in the past, you don't need to make fun of his voters or the people that stood with him.
By the way,
it was his policies that we agreed with, not the person.
By the way, I didn't make fun of his voters. You didn't hear me once make fun of his voters tonight. Not once.
Well, it was more of like the clown show. That's what I didn't really like.
Well, that's what he is. He's a clown. Okay? And that says nothing about you, because guess what? I voted for him twice too. I voted for him twice. So I'm not saying anything about you. But here's the thing. I agree with a lot of his policies too, except he didn't implement them because he's too busy running around, shooting his mouth off at everybody and getting everybody angry at him so he can't get a vote in Congress. We would have gotten rid of Obamacare if he hadn't been dumping all over John McCain every minute of the day. And guess what happened? John McCain turns out to be the deciding vote on Obamacare. And he goes, and I was sitting with her on the couch watching that vote. And she said, oh, McCain's against Obamacare. He's going to vote yes. I said, no, he's not. Because Donald Trump has been dumping all over him for months, and he's not going to give Donald Trump a win. I know John McCain. Great man, great hero for our country, but one of the worst tempers I've ever met. And he made fun of John McCain. He called John McCain not a war hero. The guy sat for years in the Hanoi Hilton being tortured. They offered to get him out because his father was an admiral. And he said, I'm not leaving unless all my men leave with me. I don't know what all you call that. I call that a hero. Donald Trump said he wasn't a hero because he got captured. He goes, I like the people who don't get captured. A guy who, by the way, avoided military service because he said he had bad heels. So I don't know what you call this guy, but I'm willing to admit I made a mistake supporting him. I did. I thought I could help make him a better president. And I couldn't because he doesn't listen to anybody. How do I win over your vote? Because if you look at some of the things that I stand for, they're very similar to Donald Trump, and some of them are exactly the same. But why don't you elect somebody who can actually do it? Because if you listen to him now, what's he say? 8 years ago, he said, I am your voice. Okay, I like that. What's he say now? I am your retribution. You think he's really your retribution? He's not. He's his retribution. Go ahead.
Can I respond to you real quick?
Yeah.
So my thing is, one major thing that made me upset with Donald Trump was the forced vaccinations and masks. I do not think that we should be forced to have anything in our body that we do not want.
Okay.
My loyalty is not to just complete Donald Trump. It's his policies and his ideas, and that's who I'm wanting as a leader, as someone that is going to support those ideas, not the person Donald Trump, but his policies and ideas that he was suggesting to the American people.
I totally agree to you. How about you get somebody who will actually do it? How about you get someone who will actually do it? He can't do it. Can you imagine what that next administration would be like? Who's going to go work for him? 40 of his 44 cabinet members have said they would never work for him again. What's that tell you? Who in Congress is going to work with Donald Trump? How's he ever going to get something passed? You think the last time was a clown show. Just wait. And how about him out there saying he is going to weaponize the Justice Department against his enemies? He's going to sick the IRS after his enemies. Is that what the hell we elect a president for? To go out and chase the people that he doesn't like and use the power of that you gave him and I gave him to do that? Look, the way I'm going to convince you is that you're going to, at one moment, I know this, I can see it in your eyes, it's going to click. And you're going to say to yourself, you know what? This Christie guy ain't so bad. And you know what? He's told me the truth about Trump. You know in your heart that the things I'm saying about him, I'm not criticizing any of his policies except for the wall, which he just should have built. And he shouldn't have lied to us and said Mexico was going to pay for it, right? I would have been willing to pay for the wall. And I bet you would have been willing to pay for the wall too. But we got 52 miles of wall. And we got all these people coming over the border every day. And yes, Biden's fault, but it's his fault too. Because if he had built the wall, many fewer of them would have been able to get over. The way I'm going to win your vote is you're going to say, you know what? I don't like the fact that he's picking on Trump, but you know what? He's telling the truth because the guy acts like a jackass. And we got to do better than that. We have to do better than that. And we can do better than that. We can have conservatives who are tough. Nobody will tell you I'm not tough. And to say the stuff I'm saying, you better be tough because you can imagine the people who come yelling at me. But it's tough and competent to do the job, to get it done. You vote for me, you're going to be not only happy with the policies I propose, but the fact that I actually get them passed and they become law in this country. And I will tell you this, I absolutely believe, like most of the people in this state believe, that I don't want more government. I want less. I don't want people telling me what to do. I want to have freedom of choice. And, you know, that used to be a conservative principle that people stood up for. And when he was tested, did he stand up for it? He didn't. And so he talking. Came time for action. He wasn't with you. He didn't do it. I will. That's the difference. And you know why you know I will? Because I've done it before. He never has. Thanks for the question. All right, I promised the guy with the hat behind the guy with the hoodie that he'd be next, so can't break my promise.
Hey, hello, Mr. Christie. My name's Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan, nice to meet you.
So I was wondering, I mean, you made it pretty clear about your feelings about Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. So I was wondering which candidate you would consider supporting if you were to drop out of the race. Because you're only at 11% in the polls and Trump's at 44.
Well, I don't know. I'm not considering dropping out. And you know, I'm at 11% in one poll, I'm at 18 in another. So I'll pick the 18. You can pick the 11. No, look, I hope that we nominate a Republican I can vote for. And by the way, when I said the things I just said about Nikki Haley, it's just the truth. It doesn't mean that I couldn't vote for her if it was her or Joe Biden. But that's not the choice right now. The choice is me, her, or Donald Trump in New Hampshire. And so that's the way I'm couching that choice. So, you know, Jonathan, like I feel like there are a number of folks in this race that I could vote for. But right now I'm voting for me. And I hope you do too.
Thank you very much. Just piggybacking onto the question related to how are you going to balance the budget? How are you going to, or what is your plan for lowering or not raising taxes and maintaining Social Security benefits for the aging population? Thank you.
Excellent. They took your question. Now, what that means is one of two things. Either she is a secret agent for the red vest people, or you got to give her a red vest. All right? She just earned the red vest. Okay. This is an issue that has to be dealt with now. In 10 years, there will be an automatic 24% reduction in everybody's Social Security. Automatic in 10 years if we don't fix this problem. Today, it's in the early 80s. So you can't have a system that was designed to pay people for 3 or 4 years, pay people for 20 or 30 years, and expect it's going to be solvent. So we need to raise retirement age. Second, we need to have means testing. And I did this at the debate the other night. I looked in the camera and said, Warren Buffett, if you are taking Social Security, you should be ashamed of yourself. He has not responded, which makes me think he's taken the check. Like, come on, man. Look, this country's provided great opportunities for folks. And for a lot of people, it helped them with their own work. Social Security was never meant for wealthy people. It was meant as a safety net to make sure that people did not grow old in poverty. Now, I had someone at a town hall meeting say, I put my money in, I want my money out. Okay, here's the answer to that. We pay for lots of things we don't get anything out of directly. Lots and lots. My best example for me is food stamps. Now, fortunately for me and Mary Pat, we've never had to be on food stamps. But I'm okay with paying for food stamps in my taxes because I don't want anybody in this country, in the richest country in the world, going to bed hungry if we can avoid it. We have to start looking at Social Security that way. It is a security, an income security program for people in their retirement. And if you've made, and I don't know what the number is in terms of how much wealth you need to have to not qualify, and that'll be a part of an ugly, ugly negotiation on this. But I know there is a number where if you're above it, you don't need the check. And so, those are the two things that I would do. And look, you're not gonna be able to do it directly. You're gonna have to set up a national commission with both parties, and they're gonna have to come together, and you're gonna have to get a commitment that they vote up or down on the proposal and all the niceties of legislation. But only if a president stands up and says this must be done, will it be done. And so I think that's the way that we need to do it. And by the way, that's going to be good for the debt that we were talking about, because it's a big driver of debt, because there really isn't a trust fund anymore. And the trust fund's been out of money for a long time. We're funding Social Security with debt. And so we've got to stop doing that. So for the people who really need it, I want them to have it and at the full level. But I want people who are younger to get it later, because they're living longer. And like I said, we have 4 children between the ages of 20 and 30. If they can't adjust to a few years of increase in their retirement age with 40 years notice, we got much bigger problems with our 4 kids than Social Security. But it has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with now. The next president will have to deal with it, because if they don't, we will be within 2 years. And then it will be like a fire drill, and it won't get fixed the right way. So we're overdue to fix it, but we have enough time if the next president's willing to stand up and do it, and I will be willing to do that. So thank you. Yes, sir, in the back, plaid shirt.
Thank you, Governor. I'll follow up on the Second Amendment
Yes, sir.
raised by the older gentleman over there, my age. So if we can condense your answer, balance is a key word. You've mentioned it several times. I concur. You're speaking with an independent, purple-minded state. No one here in this room, or I'm sure in the state of New Hampshire, if offered a referendum, would vote for elimination of the Second Amendment rights. But I am absolutely positive that we would vote for, 1, much further, more intense background checks, 2, AR-15 military rifles only given to law enforcement. The military, but hold on to your pants. Law enforcement, the military, or as I have suggested to my own congressional reps, we have a lot of gun clubs in New Hampshire. They can apply for a license, a permit to have us shoot an AR-15 at their range, so it's under control. So if you would reference that, comment on that in
Sure.
a condensed version, I would appreciate it.
You got it. I have no problem with more extensive background checks. I don't. I think that would be fine. But I will tell you, as I said to this gentleman's answer, I don't think the AR-15 thing solves a problem. I really don't. And look, I respect that you have a difference of opinion, and that's what this country's all about. And as I said to you off the top, you're not going to agree with everything I say. And when you shook your head there, I got a pretty good indication that you didn't. But you're going to know what I think. I wouldn't be in favor of that. Yes. Yep. And so, but I didn't mention background checks before as part of the answer, but there's no question that extensive background checks are important to have. You shouldn't be having people who have criminal backgrounds or people who have engaged in domestic violence being weaponized. I would totally agree with that. But I'm not going to start picking out weapons to take out of the Second Amendment. I'm just not, because I don't think it will solve the problem. It not only disrespects the rights granted to us in the Second Amendment, it doesn't solve the problem. And so I went like 2 for 3 on your thing. So, if you hit 667, you wind up in the Hall of Fame, for gosh sake. So this young lady right here.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. We talked about Trump, everything he did with the border. My question is, if you were to be elected president, how would you approach the border crisis?
Like that question, because it's about being practical, right? You've heard if you watch any of the debates, you've heard Governor DeSantis say he will shoot them stone cold dead when they cross the border. He's also said he's going to send the American army into Mexico. Just what we need. Let's invade Mexico. Just for fun, let's invade Mexico, right? Look, those are TV tough guy answers. And this is a really complicated problem, and you deserve a much more thoughtful and better answer than that. And this is what I would do. I'd do 5 things. First, on day 1, I'd sign an executive order to send the National Guard to the border to work with the overwhelmed Customs and Border Patrol officers. What do I mean by overwhelmed? In the last 11 months, they have averaged 200,000 illegal encounters a month. A month. So they're overwhelmed. They need help. That's what the National Guard is here for, to protect inside the United States. I'd send them there to help. Second, I would add 10,000 new Customs and Border Patrol officers. But to do that, it's going to take at least a year, because by the time you recruit them, train them, and deploy them, it's at least a year, maybe a little bit longer. So you keep the National Guard there until they're ready, but when they're ready, you start to take National Guard out and replace them with trained Customs and Border Patrol officers. 3, 200,000 illegal encounters a month. You know how many detention beds we have at the border? 38,000. 200,000 encounters a month, 38,000 beds. I went to law school because I wasn't good at math or science, but even I can figure that out. Not good math. I double the number of beds. We need 80,000 beds at the border to deal with the people who come over and have to wait to get a hearing. That's point 4. Right now, if you come in here claiming political asylum, you have to wait 4 years for a hearing. You know what we do? Can't keep them for 4 years. We release them into the country and we say, by the way, come back here to El Paso for your hearing in 4 years. Absolutely. They'll all be back for their hearing, which may result in them being kicked out of the country. They don't. They go into this huge, vast country we have. They get a job and they hide. We have to triple the number of immigration judges. If we triple the number of immigration judges, we can get the time for a hearing to under a year. We can detain them for that period of time with the right number of beds. And then if there are people who deserve asylum and they get their hearing and they pass it, great. Then they come into the country. If they don't, back home. 5th, we have to change the immigration laws in this country. We have 6 million open jobs in this country right now. 6 million jobs that employers cannot fill. I have to conclude, in this economy, if a job is empty, it's because an American doesn't either want to do it or can do it. We've had this happen to us many times over the course of our history. And when we do, what do? We bring in immigrants who want to come to this country and have those skill sets. And they come in legally. They get visas to work. They learn the language. and they become part of this country. And there may be a couple of Mayflower folks in here, but I haven't found a lot yet. All of us come from people who immigrated here in that way. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother came over here in 1901 from Sicily in the boat. And my grandfather was born on the boat between Sicily, that must have been something, between Sicily and the United States, because his ticket came up. He was a stonemason. They were building in New York and New Jersey, and they needed good masons. So he got his ticket to come over. And originally, he said to my great-grandmother, she was 9 months pregnant. He said, you wait here, I'll go to America, and then I'll send for you. She's like, sure, buddy, I'm coming with you. And he goes, well, what if you have the baby on the boat? She's like, I'll be fine, don't worry. I'm not letting you go to America by yourself. And my grandfather, who was the one who told me these stories, always told me that the most amazing day of his life was the day he doesn't even remember. He was 4 days old when he arrived at Ellis Island. And when he came, they made him an American citizen. And we need to get back to having a merit-based immigration system where the jobs we need to be filled, those people go to the front of the line. And second, we need to have E-Verify so that employers who hire people know whether the person's legal or not. That will discourage them from hiring illegal people and encourage them that when they hire someone, they're doing the right thing. Now, to do those things, the Democrats are going to want something because they don't want merit-based immigration and they don't want E-Verify, right? So if we're going to get those things, we're going to have to give them something. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's something with the Dreamers. Maybe it's something with Path to Citizenship. I don't know what it's going to be, but we're going to have to figure it out and get it fixed. And this is where being a governor in a blue state will really help me, because I had a Democratic legislature for 8 years. I couldn't do anything unless I negotiated with them and worked it out. Now, I used the bully pulpit. I worked hard to move them closer to my position so I could come closer to a real win than not. And more times than not, I succeeded. But that's what we're going to have to do on immigration to fix the long-term flow of people coming in illegally. If they know there's a pathway to get here legally, they'd prefer it because then they don't have to hide. They don't have to worry about getting arrested. They don't have to worry about getting sending back. And so that's not shoot them stone cold dead at the border. And that's not sending the army in. It's not nearly as sexy as all that, but it will actually work and actually get done. And I think that's what we need to do now in this country. We've had 20 years of this argument. Going all the way back, President Bush, 43, to his credit, tried to fix it. Couldn't get support in Congress to do it. And for the 20 years since then, everybody's dug their heels in and said, I'm not moving, I'm not compromising. And now what do we have? We have what is essentially, just craziness down at the southern border. And if you live in Texas or Arizona or New Mexico or California, in those areas, it's dangerous. And so we need to do something about it, not only for our economy, but just as importantly for our national security, because we don't know everybody that's coming over the border. We know that there's been 200 people just in this year who were on the terror watch list who tried to get in through Mexico. So this is a national security issue too. So that's the way I would deal with it. Those are the 5 things I would do. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Hi, good evening. I would like to thank you first off for the progress that you made with the budget in New Jersey. It's a great state.
Thank you.
And of course, and I would like to ask, what are your plans for combating the implementation of United Nations Agenda 21 in our American cities on the local level? And things such as the Wildlands Project, if you're familiar with that.
I am not familiar with either one of them. So why don't you explain them to me and I'll see if I have an opinion.
Yeah. So there are a lot of non-government organizations that are pushing climate change initiatives. And I'm an environmentalist. That's why I got involved in politics. So groups like ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, they're implementing policies through city councils and non-government organizations that are claiming that they're going to help climate initiatives. But when you look on United Nations Agenda 21's website, Chapter 7, it talks about human settlement zones and human habitation zones. So through the rezoning laws in the cities in the United States, they are redistricting cities. I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of that, and a lot of people in their areas have seen a lot of that. And the Wildlands Project is an initiative, and it was a biodiversity assessment that was held by the United Nations, where they have intentions on expanding national parks within the United States and confiscating land through redistricting, rezoning laws via eminent domain.
Right.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with any
Yeah.
of that. It's a
Well, now you mentioned something I didn't know about United Nations 21, Chapter 7. Now you're going to make me go home and read that. So you give me homework
yes,
tonight.
it's,
I got to go.
Agenda 21 and 2030, and it's on UN.org. Chapter 7, they call
Great.
them human habitation
Now I got
zones.
homework tonight because you're guilting me into this, and you're right. I got to read it now. But let me just tell you, I can answer your stuff in general about the way I would deal with the United Nations agenda on that. They have no business telling the United States of America how we govern ourselves. They don't do what they're supposed to do all that well, let alone be involved in this. And so my view on it would be local zoning laws should be made by both not only the local officials, but also with the oversight of the state government. And if we start to see things on the local level getting out of control, the state has the ability to come in and be able to set parameters for that. And if we start to see things like eminent domain in even broader abuse than it's being abused right now, and if it's meant to apply it to implement this agenda, we have to stop it, because the fact is that property rights are one of the bedrocks of this country. When you buy your property, unless the government has an overwhelming interest, and then they have to compensate you fairly for it. But even then, they have to have an overwhelming interest to take your land. And we should not have that changing at all. And certainly shouldn't be the United Nations telling us what to do, given that we're the biggest funder of the United Nations, and they're not doing the job that we asked them to do in the first place anyway. So thank you for giving my homework assignment for tonight. Come to the next town hall next week, and I will have read it, and then we can have even a deeper discussion about it. Yes. Here you go.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions. Is that okay? Okay. So,
What's your name?
Hannah,
And how old are you, Hannah?
9 going on 10 December.
Excellent. I'll give you 10.
Thanks. Governor Christie, I was wondering if you could give me at least 3 reasons why you should be elected over anybody else in the race. And my other question is, as you already said, you were going to build up the border in your first day, but is there anything else you would do on the first day?
All right. So let's start with the first day agenda, and then I'll get to the 3 reasons, okay? The border would be a priority on the first day. Freezing all regulations that are in process by the Biden administration on the first day, because I don't want any of those to go into effect until we've had an opportunity to look at them and see if they're really necessary. And if they're not, then we'll get rid of them. That'll probably give me plenty to do in the first day. I also have to go to a parade and a bunch of inaugural balls and all that stuff, but we'll deal with that stuff before we go to the parties. And it's important because these regulations, every one of them takes authority away from the state you live in and the locality you live in. And I would much rather have those decisions being made where you can have an impact on them in your town or in your state than all the way in Washington, D.C., where you're going to have much less of a chance to have an impact on it. So that would be day one, the border and stopping all regulations that are currently pending at the time I become president. On the 3 reasons, I would give you this. Number 1, I'm unafraid to tell you the truth. I am not desperate for this job. I'm not desperate enough and ambitious enough that I'm going to lie to you to try to get it. Or give different answers to different people in different states at different times. Number 2, I think I have the kind of experience that will help me to be an effective president during really difficult times like we're in now. We've been fighting with each other endlessly, really since the Obama presidency. There's been nothing but fighting going on and very little progress. The last time this country was truly united, in my view, was after 9/11. And we haven't been since then. And so you need a president who knows how to work with both sides. I don't agree with Democrats on most things, but they get elected too. And when they do, you have to try to work with them to try to get things done. And that's what I did for 8 years as governor of New Jersey. There were 10 more Democrat senators in the Senate than Republicans. There were 16 more Democrat House members than Republicans. It wasn't close, in other words. And so I had to feel every day I had to work to try to get Democratic votes to get things done. And I think we need to do that in our country to both increase the amount of good we can do, but also, secondly, to decrease the amount of anger and bitterness we have at each other. And the third reason is that I know in my heart that America is the indispensable nation in this world. That if we want this world to have a chance at peace and stability for everybody, that America has to lead the world. And there are people in this race like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis and Vivek who don't believe that. They say America first. Now, look, I guess there's probably nobody in here that is against America first. Like, I've never found anybody yet who goes, yeah, America third. I'd like to go like Belgium first, Luxembourg second, America a nice, comfortable third, so we don't have too much pressure on us. Everybody wants America first. The difference between me and them is they think America first means America alone. I know that America can never really be first unless we're engaged with the rest of the world. And I understand that, and I'm not afraid of it. They're afraid that if they engage with the rest of the world, somehow we'll be diminished. I know that there are people dying every day wanting to come here to get the gift that you and I have been given. We've been given an incredible gift to be Americans. And I'm not afraid of that gift. I embrace it, and I want to pass it to other people all around the world. The same kind of freedom and liberty and opportunity that we have here. And the only way for that to happen is if America stands up for our friends around the world. And we're indispensable. And to the extent that we ever stop believing that, we won't be the biggest, strongest, richest, freest country in the world anymore. And I don't think some of the other people in this race believe that. So those are the three reasons that come to mind tonight. It's a really good question. I'm going to say you're 10 because tomorrow is December. And once you're in your birthday month, you're there. Now, you'll know that when you get as old as I am, you don't want the date to come because it just means you're another day older. And when you get to be 61 instead of 10, you'll be thinking, birthdays are okay because I'm still here, but I'm still older. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that you spent the time tonight to come out and that you wanted to ask a question. And the most important thing for this country to be great is for you to keep coming and caring about it, because America can't work unless our citizens care enough about it to participate. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Yes, sir. Here, stay there. Remain seated.
Thank you. Governor, first off, I know how much time, sweat, and energy you and your family have put in this campaign. Thank you. Several of the issues you have alluded to, gun violence, homeless, and so forth, have revolved around mental illness. And our mental illness system has been done away with at some time. What do we need to do to reinvigorate our mental health system, make it vigorous, widespread, effective?
You just made my wife's night, by the way. When you thanked us for all the time and energy and whatever, because she's spoken to some people recently who she said to them, "This isn't easy, you know. This is hard." So yeah, she was complaining a little bit. So now she's gonna go back to the hotel here in Concord, very happy. So thank you for that. Makes it much better for me. Yeah. So look, on the mental health stuff, it's part of what I was saying before in response to her question. We need to incentivize people to get into the treatment business, to get into dealing with this problem. It's a hard problem to deal with. And we're not incentivizing people enough. And the reason I know that is because we don't have enough people in it. So we got to figure out how to incentivize them. The biggest idea I have is the forgiveness of student loan issue. That as people are getting ready, if they go into school and they know if I get trained in psychology, psychiatry, counseling, or as a nurse providing those services, that the money I borrow over a period of years will be forgiven as long as I'm working in that profession. Because the first problem is not that we don't have enough money, we don't have enough people to provide it. Right. And I think there was, I think that there was a one size fits all thing about institutions. So for instance, I believe with folks who are developmentally disabled, not mentally ill, but have a developmental disability, that they didn't belong in an institution, that they could be functioning, productive people in our society. But when we did that, we eliminated all the institutions. And that was a mistake. So what we need to do is to recreate institutions that are there for the people who are truly chronically mentally ill and need long-term care to deal with that mental illness. The developmentally disabled can do it in a home setting, in a local setting, because what they need is help and training in how to be productive and to deal with their disability in a way that allows them to work and earn a living and to be able to function safely in society. And I think we've done that really well on a local basis with the developmentally disabled. But the problem is that the mentally ill got thrown in the same pot, and it's two very different things. And so I would be for more institutions to be created, but to create them, we got to have the people to staff them. And so both those things have to happen at the same time, because an institution without people is just an empty building, and people with no place to go can't treat folks. So it has to both happen. And I think you put your finger on it. It was a mistake that I think was made out of good intention, but it just turned out to be a wrong policy, and we need to fix it. Your wife has a question also? All right, let me get to this guy, then I'll get to her, because he was raising his hand, then I'll get back to her. Okay.
Appreciate it, Governor. And also appreciate your very compassionate view on the war on drugs. Seems to have changed over time, which is fine. My question is, I drove all the way from Iowa, since you haven't held any events there, which is fine. Sure, that's fine. Put all your chips in New Hampshire. That's fine. What are your plans in the coming weeks, and would you support a independent run from Jared Kushner?
This guy, I don't know who this joker is, but I think he's been paid to be here. No, I would not support an independent run by Jared Kushner. For those of you who don't know the story that this guy is alluding to, Jared Kushner, is married to Ivanka Trump, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is I put Jared Kushner's father in jail when I was U.S. attorney, and only because he really, really deserved it. And by the way, wasn't convicted, pled guilty to every count. So, sir, you were right. I should have gone to your wife, because this guy got the unserious question award of the evening. Ma'am?
The world has a marvelous way, nefarious, of testing our presidents. October 7th is one example. New into the job, there's almost always a global incident or some kind of international incident. How would you handle it?
Well, obviously it depends on what the incident is, right? But what I would say to you is that there has to be certain principles that you follow. And let's assume it's an international incident, because that's what you were alluding to. America is safe and secure for the most part because of our friendships. Unlike Russia and China and North Korea, Iran, we don't have to buy our friends. Our friends want to be our friends because they admire our country. They admire our economic strength, our military strength, our strength of character, the freedoms that we have as Americans, the liberty that we enjoy. And so the first thing is, when an international crisis comes up, the American president has to gather your friends. You have to talk to your allies around the world and make sure you understand their point of view on the situation. You can't go off and act in a rogue and independent manner and just assume they're going to be with you. You have to talk to them and listen. A good leader listens. And America as a leading country needs to listen. That's the first thing. Second, you have to gather the very best people around you to get advice. Now, some of those people will be actually working for you at the time, and some of those people may be out in other parts of the country. But I found when I was governor that if I called somebody and asked them to come see me because I needed help, they usually came. If I were president, they definitely come. So gather the best people you can, because what you need to remember is you don't have all the answers. You're the decider, but you don't have to be the originator of every idea and the decider at the same time. And so gather the best people you can around you to give you the very best advice you can. Third, remember what you stand for. Don't compromise the principles this country was founded on. So remember that when America takes an action, it's judged by the entire world. And so act in a way that's consistent with the principles that have undergirded this country since our founding. And fourth, and this I just learned from experience, take a breath before you decide. Take a breath. Go sleep on it, if possible. Take a moment to reflect. And for me, that reflection would include three things. One, just get away from all the noise and have some quiet so I can really think. Two would be to talk to my family, who know me best and remind me who I am, and that they want me to act consistent with that. And third would be to pray and to seek guidance from God to help make me stronger and smarter and better than I even thought I could be to try to make that decision. And that's what I would do. And I hope that would lead me to make the right decisions. I'm sure sometimes I'll make the wrong ones because we're not perfect. But I think all the things I just talked about set up guardrails for you to avoid the really catastrophic mistake. And that's the way I would deal with it. And I think, I remember thinking in 2001 when 9/11 happened that I was so relieved that George W. Bush was the president, because I knew him and I knew that in the end, he would do what he thought was right for the country and would be unafraid to do what he needed to do. Doesn't mean that every decision he made was right, but I knew it would be motivated by the right things. So the one overlay in all this is character. Character matters, because there's, I remember when Hurricane Sandy happened in my state and we lost 364,000 homes in 24 hours and a variety of other horrible things. And I remember coming home the first night and Mary Pat saying to me, "How did it go?" And I said, "This was not in the governor's guidebook." The way you know that it's a real crisis, by the way, is when everybody around the table, all those really smart people, tell you everything they think. And then when they're done, they just stare at you. That's what happened in Sandy. They told me about all the problems. No wastewater treatment or water treatment plants operational. The nuclear plant at risk. Every major highway blocked. 61 operating gas stations in the entire state. Every school closed. 2/3 of the state without power of any kind. And then they all kept quiet. And they looked at me. I was like, "Oh, damn, man, I'm governor." Like I got to make this call. Like, they're all looking at you saying, "Okay." And it's only then, the only thing you can call on after all that is your character. What's in here to say, like, I know what the right thing to do is. Let's start. And I think no matter what the crisis is, that's what a good leader does. And that's what I would try to do. Thanks for the question. That was great. Sure.
Thanks. Howdy. I In recent years, there has been a clear increase of proposed and implemented anti-LGBTQ legislation, as well as just generalized homophobia in our politics. How do you intend to protect the autonomy of state governments while also protecting the lives of LGBTQ people who may be experiencing persecution from their own government?
Well, look, part of it is educating people. Part of it is that, people are afraid of the things they don't understand. And so you need to appreciate, if you're in the LGBTQ community, that there's a lot of people in this country who just don't get it. They don't understand. It's foreign to their experience. It's foreign to the way they were raised. And so you can't automatically assume that somebody who's not acting tolerant is doing so out of malice. Sometimes they're doing it because they just don't understand. So I think education is a really important part of this. And by that, I mean that leaders need to be talking about tolerance for those things which we do not understand, and judging people based upon how they conduct themselves, not based upon who they love or how they do it. Second, I think you're right about, the autonomy of states is very important. And I don't want to see a whole lot of federal laws in this regard, but this needs to be covered by civil rights laws. I mean, employers should not be able to discriminate on this basis, and people who grant housing, apartments or whatever, shouldn't be able to discriminate on that basis. And so the civil rights laws, as they protect lots of different folks who were once the focus of discrimination, they need to apply to folks in that community as well. And that's one way the federal government can be involved. But third, I think there's also a part in the LGBTQ community that needs to understand that they have to be a part of the solution too. And so to be in someone's face about it all the time, to make that the defining characteristic of who you are and only characteristic of who you are in public, isn't good for anybody. And no matter what those characteristics are that you think are particularly important, any one of them shouldn't be what defines you to the public. And I think when people see that and feel it, instead of wanting to be welcoming, instead they want to push it away. So I think that there's a role for the community as well to understand that there has to be tolerance going both ways. It doesn't mean you tolerate prejudice. It means that you tolerate differences. Because guess what? That's exactly what members of the LGBTQ community are asking others to do, is to be tolerant of their differences. And so, in the end, I think that this education and these attitudes have to be taught at home. If you don't have a home environment where they teach you to be tolerant, I don't care how much they tell you in school. We learn the most from our parents or from the loved ones who raise us. And so I think all of us have to talk and think about how we create that environment in our home, which says, because a lot of times for Mary Pat and I, it's our kids teaching us. So like parents have to be open to that too. There's stuff I just don't understand. I wasn't raised. Now I was raised in the 70s, and it was a much different world then. And so younger folks can't just assume that if we don't get it initially, that it's because we're bigots. Sometimes we just don't get it because we don't get it. And you got to be patient with us. Be patient with us and talk to us. And over Thanksgiving, we were having all kinds of conversations with our 4 kids between 20 and 30 about all the ways that we are offensive. This was a top 3 topic of the Thanksgiving weekend. I get time off from the campaign. I get to go home and relax. And meanwhile, I have my kids telling all the ways that for me, and Mary Pat, it was all the ways that, we don't get it. But for me in particular, it's all the ways that I'm embarrassing. And so I sat and listened to a lot of that. I'm of course initially resistant to hearing that, but over the whole weekend, it lands. And I think that has to happen in homes. Like we can't and shouldn't rely on schools to do this, because I don't know exactly what they're saying. And sometimes they're saying stuff that like I don't agree with and I don't want taught in my family. But if you want to take that attitude, then you have to take the responsibility in your house for teaching it yourself. You can't say, I'm not doing anything and I don't want you to do anything either. Well, that's not acceptable. And I think that's the way to do it. And I think if we do that, we've done pretty well in this country, not universally well, but pretty well in making folks who look, sound, act differently, ultimately feel like Americans. And that's not the same all over the world, hardly. But, you know, I remember like those stories that I was telling you about my grandfather. Like, you know, he told me stories about, you know, when they first came to New York and New Jersey, that, and his father was going around to get work. They had signs on doors of some construction companies that said, no WAPs need apply. Right. So like they had their moment of intolerance. The Irish had their moments of intolerance. And you go through all of the different ethnicities and religions. And the one thing I would add, given what's going on in the world right now, we all have to speak out against stuff that's founded in hate. We all do. Ignorance is not an excuse for hate. And when I see some of the anti-Semitic activity that's going on, especially on college campuses around this country, we all should be worried about that because, you know, tonight it's Jewish Americans who are scared, but you don't know who it could be next. And next it could be you. And if we don't stand up against that kind of hate, then we can't expect that when it comes to be our time in the barrel, that they're going to stand up for us. So I think we have a really important moment right now in this country. And this is why when I said in the beginning about, you know, all the division and the hate that's been caused by the language that gets used by leaders, it's got to stop. We have to stop as leaders speaking that way, or if we're not doing it, but others are, we need to call them out. And that's part of what I'm doing. So it's a really good question. And this thing will continue to evolve. It will continue to evolve. But what we need to do is to make sure that we start in our own homes by educating people about why folks feel the way they do, and then preach intolerance, because it's really important. That's a good question. Thank you. Yes, sir, right there.
Thank you. I own a small manufacturing company. Earlier this week, we got our quote for health insurance for next year went up 14%. So we're paying more and more for less and less. We have probably the most inefficient and ineffective healthcare system of any developed country in the world. What do you want to do about it?
Well, let me go through the premises of your question to make sure that I let you know where I agree with you and where I don't.
Okay.
I don't think we have the most ineffective healthcare system in the world. And my proof of that is that people from all over the world come here to get treated because we have some of the best treatments available any place in the world. I thought you said ineffective. All right. Well, inefficient we are. That one I'll give you. Look, I believe in the private sector, but I don't believe in a completely unbridled private sector. And what this unbridled private sector in the healthcare industry has caused is the creation of these things called pharmacy benefit managers. So let's use them as an example of inefficiency and cost. They are the middleman, between the pharmaceutical companies who create the drugs and invent them and the pharmacies who dispense them. And what they do is they soak up tens of billions of dollars, and where they make most of that money is by taking the discounts and rebates that pharmaceutical companies give intended for us, and they absorb, in some instances, 75 or 80% of those rebates as their profit for coordinating the system. And then the little bit that's left gets to us at the pharmacy. When you look at the cost of healthcare right now, pharmaceuticals is one of the biggest costs, in part because of our success, because we have more and more drugs that can help treat people in a way that doesn't require them to go to the hospital and have longer term care. So I would get rid of pharmacy benefit managers. They provide nothing. And the reason you know they provide nothing is, you know who owns most of them now? Insurance companies, right? So the insurance companies going, I know how to continue to charge a 14% increase. And I own a small business too. And my renewal came in July, and mine was up 12%. And it kills you. And what are you going to do? You got to pay it. But what we need to focus on is that these insurance companies are buying, what are they doing? They're buying the pharmacies, CVS, Walgreens, right? And they're knocking out the small pharmacies. How do they knock out the small pharmacies? Because the pharmacy benefit managers say, oh, you're not going to get covered if you go to your small local pharmacy. But if you go to CVS or Walgreens, which we own, then you can get covered, right? And the folks who get blamed the most for all this are the pharmaceutical companies. Now, they deserve some measure of blame, and I'll get to them in a second. But the majority of the useless absorption of money that we pay for is these guys, and no one talks about them. They try to keep it really quiet. Nobody talks about it. But man, you go and look at places like Cardinal Health, some of these other companies, and see how much money they're making. It's tens of billions of dollars a year. Those dollars should go to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for everyday Americans. And if we did, we would lower the cost of healthcare in this country significantly. Now, the pharmaceutical companies, look, I've told them when I've met with some of those executives, you are amongst the stupidest people I've ever met in my life. You literally just saved the world. With the treatments and other things you did during COVID, you stopped the pandemic, and people still hate you. How could that be possible? I'll tell you why it's possible, I think. Is there anybody here who wants to see another prescription drug commercial on television? Right? Like, they're talking about stuff, I don't even understand what the hell they're talking about. You need this, and then they go through the list of horribles, right? Because they have to, because they want to get sued. So then they say, you could take this drug, and they show happy people who are in parks, and they're throwing frisbees, and they're swimming, and like they're just living life to the fullest. But this could cause you to die. You could have heart attack, you could have a brain aneurysm, you could get, if you have cancer, you could do that. And then you get to the end of it, and they're all smiling and happy, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I don't know why we ever started to permit pharmaceutical companies to advertise, but we need to stop it because they spend billions of dollars on advertising that could otherwise be put towards either reducing prices or increasing their research and development to come up with the next great drug. I think that if we did that, the hate on pharmaceutical companies, we did those two things, it would lower prices significantly, and it would stop all the hate. I don't want to see it anymore. Like, look, there's not a guy our age, right, who doesn't know that there's this like blue little pill that you can take that helps with something. We get it. Everybody knows. Like, do we need another ad for that? Do we need another ad to know, like, if you have psoriasis, that there's this drug you could take? I go to my doctor to tell me that. My doctor looks at me and says, you need this. Okay, you're the doctor. Sounds good to me. I don't go into my doctor and go, what about this drug? Can I have this? Because all the people seem really happy on TV, and I'd like to be that happy. So maybe if I took this drug, I'd be that happy. I think that leads to a lot of the inefficiency and cost of it. Now, I think that Obamacare has contributed to it, because I think anytime you put the government in charge of even more of the healthcare, efficient is not usually synonymous with a government operation. And so I think it's contributed to it, but I don't think it's the major driver of it. I think since most of us get treated with pharmaceuticals, that's the way most of us get treated now. The cost of those things are just driving people rightfully to distraction, and some people to not be able to buy them and forget about the health insurance stuff that drives all that too. So I think that's the way we go about it. First, because I think that's the low-hanging fruit. Because when you want to try to reform Obamacare and Medicare, that becomes so political that you're going to have to really get some victories behind you that shows progress for you to have credibility to take that one on. And I think if we do this with pharmacy benefit managers, we have a chance to have the credibility to let us take on, Obamacare and Medicare and try to make it more efficient and better. But I think if we deal with pharmaceuticals in that way, I think the American people will see a lot of financial relief, and the anger about all this stuff will be reduced pretty significantly. All right, they tell me I can take two more. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor Christie. As president, you'd wear the hat and the title of commander-in-chief. And given the Mideast conflict, what steps have you thought might be needed to support our allies in the Middle East and protect our own military bases there?
Well, the first thing that I think you need to do is go see it for yourself, and I did. I went to Israel 2 weeks ago. I'm the first candidate who has gone since October 7th to Israel, and I'm really glad I went. Because what I saw there, it's hard to describe unless you see it personally. The inhumanity was breathtaking. I went to a kibbutz that was 600 yards from the Gaza border. And the first thing you notice when you walk in is that so many of the buildings, the homes, are charred. Because not only were the people shot, but then they burned their bodies. The other thing you notice right away is that you are kicking spent rifle shells every 3 or 4 steps. They're everywhere. Third thing is I went into a home of a 24-year-old couple who had just recently been married. The house was completely ransacked. It's a small house. It was like a 4-room house. When you walk in, the living room is right there. And the couch where the young woman was laying reading a book is turned on its side, but the entire cushion of the couch is stained with her blood. She was laying there, and that's where she was murdered. You then look back towards the door of their bedroom, and the entire wood floor near that door is stained with blood of the husband, who, when he heard the terrorists come in, came to try to protect his wife, and he was killed in the doorway of their bedroom. And I counted in the house. There were 140 bullet holes in the walls to kill 2 people. What that tells you is not only the inhumanity, but the joy they took in what they were doing. So first you need to see it and understand it, because you can't understand how the Israeli people are feeling right now unless you go into their neighborhood and see what was done to them by Hamas. And what the speaker of the Knesset, who traveled with me that day, said to me was, how can I tell people to come back here until we degrade Hamas's military capability? How can I tell them it's safe to come back here? So I'm not someone who's for a ceasefire. And the reason I'm not is because they have to first degrade Hamas's military capability before they let any ceasefire happen. The third thing I would say that I learned over there was that my suspicion that the other bad actors in the world are in the middle of this was confirmed. Because I went to a military installation where they've confiscated weapons from the Hamas terrorists. There were Russian AK-47s. There were Iranian rockets. And there were rocket-propelled grenades from North Korea. Listen, folks, this is the evil foursome: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. They encourage this. Because the more they create tumult around the world, the more they weaken us and our friends. And so I learned that this is not something that can be dealt with by just dealing with the Middle East. You have to send a message to the rest of the world of these bad actors as well, that we know they're involved. The next thing I learned over there was that when I got out of the armored vehicle the first time, and it was at this kibbutz, a woman came up to me and hugged me, and she said, "Oh, America is here." I think President Biden did a great thing going over there. and he deserves to be complimented for it. You know, Israel relies upon us, and we upon them as the only democracy in the Middle East. And it's not good enough just to send a note or send some weapons. I think President Biden was smart to go over there and show the people of Israel that the President of the United States stands with you. We need to let the world know we stand with Israel unequivocally. And that's one of the reasons I went as well. I wanted them to see that both parties, not just President Biden, but the Republicans too, have people running for president who believe that we need to stand with them. And that woman's reaction to me told me that I was right to suspect that when she looked at me and said, America's here. I symbolized the country for her at that moment. I think that's important. America needs to understand how important our support is to people, not just practically, but also psychologically when they're in real danger. I don't think we should be dictating to Israel how they conduct the war. I think their priorities should be as follows: to protect the territorial integrity and the safety and security of their people first. It's the job of every government. Second, to degrade Hamas's military capability. And third, to get their hostages home. Now, that's a really delicate balance. And we should be giving them advice behind the scenes about how best to do that. Shouldn't be pronouncing it out in public if we're second guessing them. If we've got some critical advice, which I'm sure we will, we say that privately. That's what friends do with friends. And that's the kind of president I would be. I'd pick up the phone if I disagreed with something that Prime Minister Netanyahu was doing, and I'd tell him, this is a problem, and this is why I think it's a problem, and this is why I think it's going to lead to other problems. And we talk about it as friends do. We don't grandstand on the public stage to try to score political points with the United Nations. The last thing I would tell you is that all these things are connected. America is being tested by the Chinese and the Russians in Ukraine, by the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Iranians in the Middle East. And who knows what's going to come next? This is a moment where we're being tested. And what we need is a president who understands that and won't overreact, but will make sure that these folks understand that attacks on America's friends will not be tolerated, and that we will support those friends in whatever way we need to, that we think is most effective, to be able to send the message very clearly back to them so that they realize if they're looking at Taiwan, that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Don't do it. Don't test us any further. But if we walk away from Ukraine, that will encourage them. If we walk away from Israel, that will encourage them. Now, there's a cost that's involved with this. But right now, neither one of those conflicts involve the loss of American lives. All they want is our, military hardware help. We should be willing to do that. And in Ukraine, where we spent 5% of 1 year's Pentagon budget on supporting Ukraine, and they've degraded 50% of the Russian military hardware, seems to be a pretty good investment. And we should continue, I think, to do that, because don't ever forget that the Chinese are funding this by buying Russian oil at inflated prices. And that's how they're paying for it, because Russia has no economy. Russia is not a country. It's a gas station with an army. And that's what it is. And that's the only way they're surviving. So that's the way I would look at it as president and as commander in chief. And I think that I've never had the problem of sitting across the table from someone first and having a difficult conversation. And second, it's been a very rare moment in my career where someone left that table unclear about what I thought. And I think that's what America needs right now. Strength that is direct and clear and honest, but also strength that shows you're willing to talk. Because ignoring the world, America alone, is not going to end the problems. What it will cause is those problems to come right here. And 9/11 proved to us that we're not an island and we're not immune from attack. So we need to be conscious of that. Thank you. All right, last question. Yes, ma'am. Here you go. And he's going to bring you a microphone.
I just want to say thank you for being fearless in your not you you just go through all the minutia and you tell it like it is. I'm an independent right up until tonight. And I have to say,
Thank you.
what warmed my heart was when you said the third thing is that you interjected God, because in God we trust. I've taught for 36 years and I worked until I was 76. I would bump it up when you said you're 61, 20 years, bump it up to 30.
I hope so.
Just got engaged. And
All right.
I'm looking at 80 as a new chapter. And as I said, I taught for 36 years in New Hampshire. And I've seen the degrading of our students not paying attention to what our flag means. And to take God out of the equation is such a mistake. And to have you say, in God we trust, and that you would pray, because in my day, having a moral compass was important. You worked hard and you achieved the American dream. And I've seen the good in our students, and they are wonderful. We've never taught better than we are today with the advent of the computer. But it comes down to parents working with the teachers and the government. I have to say, I have owned a gun, 44 Magnum, for 45 years. Married for 46 years to a Marine that got misty-eyed every time he saluted the flag. And nobody's going to come into my house to harm me or my family. They're going to have to go over a dead hand with wrapped around a gun. It's not the gun. It's not the gun that kills people. It is the crazies that are allowed to own a gun. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I would jump right in there and I have to say, it's in a locked compartment, and I had to travel from Nashua to Concord for 36 years, and you don't want to do something against anybody when I'm on duty. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope and pray that you will be our next president.
Thank you. All right. What's your name again?
My name is Corrine Stoney.
All right, Corrine, you want to be vice president? Come on, Corrine. Let me tell you, man. I want a vice president with a 44 Magnum. Congress will listen really quick then. You can deal with me, or I can send you to see the vice president. Well, Corrine, that's incredibly flattering, and I thank you for sharing your experience with me and the things that are obviously in your heart about this country and about what we need to do. And I would say something. I think it's great that you two are right next to each other, because when she said moral compass, it was the one thing I didn't say to you that I forgot to say to you that I should have. It matters. It matters. And my biggest problem with Donald Trump is that he doesn't display he has one. And we need to trust that our president will have a moral compass, that when the problems are the most difficult, that he's going to have something to lean back on, a sense of right and wrong. Not just what's right and wrong for me, but what's right and wrong for us. I think, running for president is the greatest gift that any American can experience. It is really hard, but it's supposed to be, because the job's really hard. And I feel so incredibly lucky to have the opportunity to do this. And I believe in my heart that it's the right thing to do, and that I'm saying things that will matter to the country and that should matter to everybody who's considering what they're going to do with their vote. And that's why I'm here. Nobody gets rich doing this. And nobody does it because, you love to stay at hotels here in Concord. They're plenty nice, but, I'd rather be in my own bed tonight. You do it because you love this country. And I'm not worried about my country. I'm really not. What I am is so hopeful for my country. Nobody in the world has an opportunity to be greater than us because of the gifts we've been given by all the people that came before us and what they did to make this country great. And look, a lot of ways I could end this, but I will end it in a way that will drive my campaign manager crazy. I want you to remember this, that sense of the people who have come before us really matters. We have an obligation to everybody who sacrificed before us not to take this for granted. Ronald Reagan used to say, freedom is just one generation away from being extinct. And he's right. And John Adams, who I think was the greatest of our founders, and not just because, he was supposed to be cranky and slightly overweight, although I think those are really great attributes for a leader. And I think you should consider that very, very strongly. But Adams, when he was nearing the end of his life and America was getting ready for its 50th anniversary in 1826, said he was worried about the country because he felt we were getting too political and too divided. Does it sound familiar? And this is what he wrote in his diary. For us, he said, this is for posterity. He's writing for us. He said, you shall never know the sacrifices that were made to secure for you your liberty. I pray you make a good use of it. For if you do not, I shall repent in heaven for ever having made the sacrifice at all. I don't want John Adams to repent in heaven because I sat in my living room in New Jersey and refused to stand up and fight for this country. And I don't want him to repent in heaven for my generation because we allowed this country to go to hell. We have to fight for it. And we have to fight for it not only for us, but more importantly for our children and our grandchildren. And the next president is going to have the incredible honor of being our president on our 250th birthday. And who do we want? What kind of person with what type of moral compass do we want the world to see on July 4th of 2026 when we have that huge celebration that the entire world will watch? I think we want someone who we know makes us proud. Not that we always agree with, but that makes us proud by the way they conduct themselves every day, that they tell us the truth, that they work hard for us, that they put our interests before their personal interests, that they understand that they have a short period of time to make a huge difference in our country and the world, and they won't waste one day of it. If you give me your vote, that's exactly what I will do. Each and every day you give me the honor of being your president, and you can start the ball rolling right here. And I will tell you this, I will promise you this. If I win New Hampshire, I'm going to be the next president of the United States, and you're going to remember tonight really, really well. Thank you all very much.